What's up, party people? We're here. We're streaming. Doing some stuff. Let me do that real quick. I literally was like, I gotta take a picture and post it up on social. Let the peoples know that we're here. Cool. Give him that crazy face. How's everybody doing today? Chilling. Cool. Good. How's YouTube's? I'm doing a cross stream right now to YouTube and Twitch. Cool. We're both up. I don't know how it happened last time, but I think the stream got set to private on YouTube. But people were still able to watch it. Maybe it wasn't set to private. I don't know. It was weird. But that was a little bad Twitch YouTube interface stuff. I swear the streaming on YouTube, second class. It's so crazy how like they just don't care about it or something. I don't know what it is about it. And you go over to Twitch and that's the thing, so that there's so much like built into the interface for it and stuff, and just so much more clear and legible. But yeah, they'll catch up. Actually, I really prefer YouTube YouTube for streaming, or at least as a consumer. I like seeing it because lets you like scrobble through the stream. Like if I come in like an hour late, I don't have to do that thing like you do on Twitch where you click the person's icon, you go to the videos, you go to the reach and broadcast, you have to click the one that doesn't have a thumbnail for some reason, scrobble through that to find where you were at. Like that's like 5 different steps, man. I'm gone. And then on YouTube, you just go in, scrobble back, it's there. I mean, if they let you, you know. But, yeah, it's much more convenient. Twitch could take a couple notes. But cool. Post it up that we're live. Let that story upload. I don't know why stories need like 20 minutes to upload every time. It's a JPEG. Oh man. But let's get into today. Today we are working on some stuff. I was doing some stuff before the stream. I had like an idea this week. I've done it before. Let me see if I can pull it up. Like any good example of it. Probably not gonna find it. Yeah. GitHub would probably be the better place to go find it. That's not me. That's me. And then gamepad. Cool. So basically, previously for Blender, I've created an add-on that you can see. Oh. Let me pull up that. Cool. Now you can see. So I made an add-on for Blender called Blender Gamepad. And it basically lets you use your DualSense to control the camera in Blender. And ideally do things like record the input that you're doing and then play it back to things. So I could press maybe keys on my gamepad and then that reflects to different objects in the scene and it makes the objects look pressed. I used it for like doing like an arcade, like a game stick like rig, where I like modeled like a 3D arcade stick, and then I made the buttons like press when I press the button on an actual gamepad. Totally not necessary. You can just manually probably hook all that up or something, but it's just so much more fun to do it with a gamepad like live. So I took this plugin, and actually a while ago I made a MIDI version of it. So it basically used the kind of like architecture that I had here, and I basically just created like a MIDI version of it. Like when I press the piano key, piano button animates. Same concept. I'm trying to find, I think I did a blog article about it. Yeah. Maybe you'll see, the video. So you can see here, this is the video I was talking about where Like I'm here, you'll see the MIDI keyboard in a minute. We assign different keys, like the C key, the D key, to different meshes in our scene, which in this case tend to be actual piano keys. And then you can see in front of me I have an actual piano, and then when I play the piano, it syncs up to the keys. And then what you're not seeing, and I'll show it maybe in a minute, is that all this is actually being saved as animations. So when I go down into the timeline, I can actually see that it plays back what I was just doing. So it's kind of like recording my input into Blender. So that was like another plugin that I put together. Like I said, based off of the gamepad one. And I was like, that's cool, but who's gonna want to do that? You know, like practically, like who actually wants to sit there, plug in their MIDI thingy, and play a song into Blender and have the song do stuff? Like that's not that actually efficient. What you would want to do is you'd want to record your song as like a MIDI file so that you can use that MIDI file as like a kind of source of truth, and you can use that in Blender to do some animations, and then you maybe use that same MIDI file to go sync up an animation in some other like visualizer experience or something else, or actual music app, and put all those things kind of together. Because playing something in Blender and then having to like sync up your play to like something else, like as any musician knows, like every play is going to be unique. Like it's really hard to get the exact same like timings and stuff. So it's just better to use MIDI files. So I was like, what would it take to use MIDI files? Like what would I have to do if as a user I wanted to basically come in here, and you can see I have a MIDI importer kind of window. You can see all the piano key things from my previous plugin that I kind of just stole. And let's say like I put in a MIDI file, and I grab a MIDI file here, and I have like songs from FF8, or I have Ape Escape, or like Zelda. Or honestly, in my case, I'm going to be using this particular file, which is a test MIDI file that's like open source, and it basically just plays the C progression. Just plays like a C chord or something. So let's bring that in. You can see that that's a MIDI file, MIDI. And then ideally we want to do something where we generate keyframes. So to catch you up where I'm currently at, I have the UI showing, as you can see. We have UI, we have like stuff. We have a MIDI file that the user can pick, and the MIDI file loads like based off of where it's at. And it reads the MIDI file. Like I actually have a MIDI library that's going and reading, and I'll go a little deeper into all this stuff, but just as a quick example, you can see here, this was like a previous file that I had playing, or it loaded. It didn't play, but it loaded it. And then here I'm going to load this file, so you'll see we generate keyframes, and it doesn't do anything. It crashes Blender. Interesting. I think I might have been changing stuff. I'll let that crash. But basically, oh, nice. So you can like zoom in like this. Okay, cool. You can see it better. So basically, there you go. Cool. These are like each note that comes out. Like I'm basically looping over each. I mean, if you really want to get into it, a MIDI file is made up of different tracks, because you can have different instruments inside of a MIDI file. You can have a piano, you can have a keyboard, you can have bass. So each track or channel is representing like a different instrument or something, and then each of those tracks contains notes. So this is just one track that I'm displaying here, and these are all the notes inside of that track that I'm looping over. And you can see that notes are basically comprised of a couple different properties. Is the note playing? Like, is it pressed, or has it been depressed? And that's important. So like I could hold down a key and sustain a key, and this kind of like system helps me keep track of that. So I can note on, and then like wait, and then note off, and then that like does like a hold. The note number is basically just corresponding to the actual note itself. You can see that these are all numbers like 60, 64. I can show you, because I actually just had to pull this up and research it. This basically is like a standardization by whoever created MIDI files back in the day, like the organization that came together and said, this is a MIDI file. They basically decided that notes will start at 0. And a 0 note is basically like the last octave, or like the first octave. I don't know how you would describe that, like the 0 octave. And you start from there and you go all the way to the maximum octave, which is technically 8, but I guess they go up to like 9 because, I don't know, some music person would probably tell me that. So it starts from 0 and it goes all the way to 127. Basically, what's happening in each of these like columns, you can see this is one set of just notes. Like imagine this is like one entire keyboard. You can kind of see it here visualized. Like C1, C2, C3, C4, each of these sets is 12 keys. So if I come back up here, this is like 12 keys in this list. And if you look at the indexes, you can see that it basically goes from 0 to 11, which would be 1 to 12. So each of these is like 12, 24, 36, 46, whatever. You can see that it's just increments of 12 to create these numbers, or increments of each of their kind of corresponding kind of thing. This is like the kind of math stuff. But basically, if you wanted to figure out like what a 73 was, you'd say like, oh, an octave is 12 notes, so divide 73 by 12. That's, let's say, 5 or something. I don't actually know. And it'd be like 5.4 or something, you know. You'd round that and you say, I only care about the 5. You take the 5, you times it times 12. So that way you know like, oh, this is the 5th octave and we're X amount of like notes in. So that gives you like a baseline. So that would give you like 72 basically, like 12 times 5 or 12 times, I guess 6 technically. So you'd have 72. And then with that, you'd take 74, say, and you'd subtract it from that number. And then that would give you kind of this baseline index of like what note you kind of are. And that's the math that I'll show you in a minute that's going on in the app. But that's kind of what all these kind of numbers mean and why they range from just such like giant numbers. You're basically dealing with notes, octaves, putting those two concepts together. It's like a telephone number. You got to like multiply like all the different variations or all the different combinations that can happen or something. This is that equivalent in a way. I guess it's like 9 times 12, about 127, something. Yeah, but so that's that. That's the note count. We have a velocity because when you're pressing notes, you can press them hard, you can press them soft. And time. So this one was an interesting one. Basically, the way that this library works, you can see that time is always like 0, or it's like a very small-ish number. And it goes back to like 0 constantly. And the reason that it's doing that is because it's actually representing a delta time. So this is basically, I would start from the top of this, say, like let's imagine I'm at the start. So time would technically be 0. And then as I go and iterate over each of these notes, I would go and I would take this time and I would actually add it to some sort of like variable that I'm keeping track of in my app. So I would have some sort of global time variable in my app. And then as I go, I'd add 480, 960, 480, 480. And by the time we're like here, my time variable would actually be like 3,000, 4,000 something. But that just lets me know like kind of where I'm at. With this kind of system, it would definitely be hard to do something like a quick search to figure out like, oh, is this note at this time? Because to figure that out, you basically have to add up every previous note to kind of determine where your current position is. So that algorithmically isn't that efficient. But I'm sure that in a system where you're basically wanting to play MIDI music, like you're going from start to finish. Like I'm not going in the middle of a file, even though I might be, honestly. That makes more sense to do this API. I don't know. This API is kind of funky. I don't know why they do like note on, note off. They should just do like a Boolean that's a pressed kind of state. There's lots of weird things with this API. I'm not going to judge it. But that's how the API works. So that's what's important. So this is what happens basically when we read a MIDI file. Oh man, what's going on, Blender? Wake up. Get to the party. Cool. So this was kind of like my setup for working on the plugin. I have the plugin installed as a MIDI to keyframe development plugin. I pull it over to the side just so that like when I click into Blender, I'm not like clicking out of it or something. I don't know, but I can keep it here just so you can see it. And then this is key. Oh, you can see where it starts to get in the way. Let me pull it down here. Let me toggle the system console. So this is very important when we're doing some Blender work. We could go into the scripting tag and we could try to like use this console, but for some reason when we do the Python print statement, it doesn't show up here unless we do some like special utility function to kind of wrap our print function with another function or something. So this is useless to us. So we don't even look at that, and we come over here and we open the system console, and this is basically what happens there, but a more unfiltered version. So you're seeing like more information here. Like you can see all the other plugins also kind of like reporting here as well. Let me kind of increase the size for you. How about that? Is that good? Cool. So let's talk code for a second. This should work. I don't know why it was like crashing. Let's try it one more time. And if it crashes, I'll take a look at it, but I don't know why it was crashing. It's like giving me guff. What's going on? Bam. And before we click that, I guess that's why I had it off on the other screen, because when I click it, it'll go off, but I'll come back. Yeah, it's like crashing. Why is it crashing? Look at this. It's not even reporting anything. And it's straight up just like crashing. It was not doing this before the stream. And I did not touch any code, did I? We can undo what I did, but it's not going to do much. Let's undo what I did. And let's close Blender real quick. Good old end task. But before I close this app, let me give you an idea of what the MIDI file looks like to give you a cool visualization. Because I was like, what am I working with? You can see that this is the C kind of like chord file that I was telling you about. That it's basically like, you can see the piano here. This is the C letter with the 4th octave. And this is C3, C2. And you can see that it's playing C4 and C2 at the same time, as well as, I'm assuming, D, E over here, as well as F, G over here, G. So, yeah, that's kind of what's happening. And then when I mentioned to you that a MIDI file is multiple tracks, you can see in this one, this is the Loco Roco music. This is actually multiple different instruments kind of like interlaced all together here. And if I can go and I can literally turn off these are tracks here on the side, these kind of like colored boxes in the Audacity kind of UI. And you can see as I press it, it toggles on the different instruments and stuff. So when I'm talking tracks in my MIDI file, this is literally what I'm talking about. I have to like pick one of these specifically to iterate over, because I'm not just like going over all the notes at once. It's like one track per time. And it's nice to see this like colored visualization version of it. But let's close that up. Don't need that anymore. And let's figure out what's going on with Blender. Let's do that one more time. Generate keyframes. Cool, that one didn't crash. Cool. I don't know why it was crashing. I don't know what I did by like commenting stuff out. Probably like made it angry. Knowing Python and how poorly Python is coded, probably something with like freaking tabs or something. And if I had just semicolons, my life would have been a lot easier. But not, but easier. But let me close this. You don't need to see me making git commits. So cool. This is the plugin in like one big file. I don't want to do that to you again. I'm sorry. But you can see here when I hit generate keyframes, let me make it a little bigger again. This file was much simpler than that Loco Roco file, which had like hundreds of like notes and stuff. So you can see that, as I said, it's the C, the E, and the G, as well as like a lower C, all pressed at once. And you can see that they're all pressed at once because you have a note on, with time 0, and it literally goes like 4 times in a row, note on, with time 0. And then after 3,840 milliseconds, I'll assume, beats, something, we go note off, and we basically note off every note that we pressed. And you can see here that it notes off 64 when we noted on 64 earlier. So that's what we're working with, and that's where we're currently at. To catch you up with the code, if you're kind of interested in that, I'll give you like a really rough overview. But basically, this is a Blender plugin, and it works with Python. And this is kind of a template that I copied from a gist somewhere that somebody set up. But it's basically a way to kind of create the properties that I created in the UI panel here. So this kind of like Python class encapsulates all the different properties that I want the user to be able to change inside the app. And the reason that we do this, I'll show you a little later, is because we actually need to keep track of this class inside of our like Python add-on instantiation like state or whatever, like the bubble that it lives in. So we basically need to keep a pointer to this class so that other things can basically access it later inside of the memory or the app. So we use Blender's built-in properties here. You can find these in like the Blender add-on documentation, but it's basically a string property for a string. The cool stuff here is if you need to do stuff like a file, like I did, or if you need to do a directory, you would basically use a subtype property on the string property class, and you could basically change it to do different types of input. So it's not just like type anything you want. You can literally have, like I have here, click this and like find a file, which is pretty cool in like one little line. And then you can see here, these are all the different objects that we associate to keys. So we have the C key, the D key. If I scroll down, you'll see C sharp, D sharp. And these are all pointer properties because I need to keep track of a Blender object in the scene. So this helps me keep track of like I said, like different objects. So if I go and I show you now, I can take this cube, let's say, and I can drag it into here, and that lets me now know that when I press the C key, I want to associate that with this cube. So that's one way to like set that up. And you can see that I literally get all this kind of free out of the box, where I get this like fancy little UI that like helps me select an object and do all this stuff. And I didn't code any of this, this comes like built in with like Blender add-ons. So that's that class. And to give you an idea, this is the scene properties. So let's do a Control F and go down. And you can see here that that class with all the properties is basically just instantiated during the register unregister life cycles of Blender add-ons. So this is just this is Blender add-on basic like 101 stuff here, kind of. You have to register the class and unregister the class. And this is just a fancy little way of like basically creating a tuple or like an array loop kind of thing of all the different kind of classes that we need to instantiate. And then we loop over that and we can just instantiate them or register them with Blender. So cool. That's where that starts. So let's close that up. And you can see here that this is the actual input panel. And you can see the remnants of it still being from the gamepad project here. I have a lot of like artifacts like that. But this is the panel. So this is what renders the actual UI. And you can see here that this actually extends the panel kind of class in Blender. And this also does all the different things that you need when you make a new panel and stuff. This is the draw function. So when you're creating a panel, it's basically like UI. Like when you're drawing, when you make UI, like you want it to put it on the screen, you're technically drawing it, and you draw it every, let's say, 60 frames per second or something. So that's what this kind of like draw method kind of applies to. So that I can in there basically define all the different kind of like input objects that I want. And this kind of like API here that I'm doing, this is just Blender kind of like stuff. You kind of would see this in maybe like Flutter or maybe Swift or something, like this kind of like method-based chaining kind of like thing here. But basically what I'm doing here is they give you a layout. And the layout is like functions that let you do components and stuff. So in this case, you see me do layout row. And that literally says make a row. And that's like saying like make a div container for my content to live inside of. And it's like a flex-based div. So literally anything inside of this row will be side by side. So you can see here, that's why I have so many different rows defined, because I want a line break every single time that I have a different like input, I have to have a different row. And then other stuff like I can do labels if I do the label method off of the layout, and that literally does like text that kind of like appends itself above. When I want to do the properties that I mentioned that the user can change and save, there's literally a prop method, and we basically pass that the pointer, or like it's not a pointer, but it's the actual the variable itself that contains all of the different properties. And then it's just a special thing. We basically pass it the thing that contains all the properties, and then we tell it what specific property we want from that list of properties. Well, it's a weird API, but it works. So yeah, you can see here that we ask for the MIDI file. That comes from the gamepad props. And then we also do all the different objects that we associate with MIDI stuff here. Boom. Yeah. And then things like buttons, you can see here that I have a couple of buttons. I have an install dependencies and a generate keyframes. These are done with the row operator method. You can see here. So that basically just calls this method that I've defined here. And I can actually go here and I can show you, if I search for this, I have an ID that I define in one of my classes that basically says that this is kind of like that function name that can be called across like the app or whatever. So that's pretty cool. So I can take this class and I also instantiate it below. I showed you that before. And with this, when I press the button, basically, it lets me define a function that gets executed in this execute method, and it basically does whatever I need it to do. Like I can do anything in here. And it gives me access to the context of the scene, so I can do things like grab the objects, I can do things with them, change them, whatever. It's nice. But in this particular case, we actually use this install button to install the MIDI library that we use to read MIDI files. And that's basically kind of like a workaround right now. Like the way Blender like works is that I'm writing Python and it's running my add-on by basically running my script inside of like an internal Python executable or whatever the Blender like has packaged within it. If you actually go and you look inside of like the Blender stuff, you'll see that you have like your own little custom Python install that comes paired with it. So they use that and they run your script, and that is just running Python. You know, like I'm not building my file to make like an exe or something. Like this is just them running my code. So if I need to do things like I need dependencies like I would inside of a normal Python application, they either need to come predefined like as actual files in my project, or I need to do what you do inside of a Python project. You use pip to install the library to your Python kind of like installation or whatever. So basically to Blender's Python, we have to install the dependencies that we need. This is really different from JavaScript, because if you're familiar with JavaScript at all and like Node.js and NPM and all that stuff, like you would basically node install something per project, but this is the equivalent of doing an npm install global every single time you want to use a dependency. It's kind of stupid. I'm sure pip, but there's probably smarter ways to do this inside of Python or something. But honestly, I think from what I've seen with Python people, that's why you have things like Jupyter Notebooks. You basically have like little like sandboxes that they create. I think they're called like virtual something, and you basically just have to do that, where you create little mini virtual sandboxes for yourself, where each dependency just lives in that sandbox. It's a little bananas. It's not a good system, but we work with it, and it works here. And you can basically use the subprocess method inside of Blender, which allows you to call the Python executable, which we can get access to by just looking for it inside of like I mentioned, the bin file inside of Blender, basically. And once we get access to the Python executable, we pass it a couple of different CLI arguments, basically. So this is me saying literally run Python and run it with pip install my add-on. And in this case, the MIDI add-on is Mido. That's the one that we're using. How's Chad doing? What's up? Cool. We're chilling. But yeah, so I had to do that. I basically copied this from Arendelle. He's another YouTuber who does geometry node type stuff, and he created a plugin that lets you do X input gamepad stuff. And he needed to actually install X input into his project to do stuff. So this code is kind of inspired by that. But you can go and you can look on Stack Overflow, and this is kind of like the standardized process that people will tell you. But yeah, so that's the UI. Like I said, we have buttons, we have properties, we have text that we show, and all that's kind of set up to the state that we have set up here. So I can do things like when I press the generate keyframes button, which I show you here, generate keyframes. We can grab the scene context. We can grab the props that we store within the scene context, and then we can grab any property we need, and in this case, the MIDI file. So I grab the MIDI file path, and I basically run it through the MIDI library here. Create a new MIDI file. We use the MIDI path that the user provides. We check really quick if it's really a MIDI file. There's probably a smarter way to do this, but I just like do that. And I also need to figure out how to do error doing to the user. Like if it doesn't work, it needs to tell the user, but whatever. Like, yeah, but we load the MIDI file. And like I mentioned, we loop over each of the MIDI tracks here. So you can see track and the index of the track. And then for each of the messages in the track, we look through it and we filter out things like metadata and stuff like that. And then we basically get access to the notes. I have to actually alter some of this stuff here because I was testing some other MIDI files, and I was finding that basically not every time you get a message, it's a note. And I was noticing that with I loaded like a Zelda file or something. They also have messages that do things like track changes and stuff like that. I think I noted that here somewhere. Did I? Delta time. Note on, note off. Yeah, you can see it here. Basically, they have note on, note off, but then, no, this wasn't it. What was it? It was like other stuff. They're literally like, it's like track change or something. And it basically lets you know like the pitch of the song was changing or something. And they're just little things to let the application know that something's happening in the song, which makes sense. You know, like not every song is just like play from start to finish. Some songs speed up, some songs slow down, some songs change like maybe BPM or something, and like, or the flow of the notes and things like that. So yeah, that was that, but we'll figure that out as we go. Right now we're working with this really simple file. It just has notes. I'll take that. And like I mentioned earlier with all that math, you basically take the note number, you divide it by 12, you round it, that gives you the octave, and then you take that octave, you times it times 12, and then minus the note by that, and that'll give you kind of the note index to let you know what the note letter is. And in this particular case, I basically just create an array here that has all the notes in like order, and when you have an index that goes from 0 to 11, it can correspond to this array. So easy, right? So we're here. I did all that before the stream. I want to catch you up. You know, I'm a nice guy. I don't want to be like that. Don't you hate it when you like tune into a stream and some person's just like sitting there and they're just like staring at their code, and then they're like, it's like tunnel vision, just like looking at it. I mean, I'm gonna do that in a minute. I don't want to talk too much shit, but I want to actually, you know, brief you and let you know what's going on. So we have a MIDI file. We have objects that we can assign stuff to. we can press a generate keyframe button, and when we do that, we can read a MIDI file and then we read all the notes at once. So what's next? Ideally, the next step would be to actually create the keyframes. So like I mentioned, we're actually have to go through now and we're gonna have to make a system one that determines whether notes are on or off. Well, let's take one major step back too. I don't care what octave we're in. I'm going to code that in later, but for right now, we're only going to care about notes pressed, because it's going to get really weird if we do octaves. If you think about it, like right now, you look at my list, I have the letters C through A listed or whatever, and all the sharp, notes. That's 12 notes. If I wanted somebody to assign objects to every single key in a keyboard, that would be a lot of objects. I mean, somebody would maybe want to do that for an application. I don't know. Maybe that's the animation. It needs a lot of things to animate. Maybe you're doing a real keyboard and you want to do it. But for me, for like simple purposes and the kind of like animations that I'm doing, or at least for an MVP, let's just keep it simple right now. So we're not going to consider the octave. So anytime that we see a C key, we're just going to assume it's a C key. It's going to get a little weird because keys will overlap or something, but whatever. We'll figure that out. Maybe we only do like C relative octave. Nah. So yeah, we'll only care about the letter. So I'll have to create some sort of like state inside of like my thing that basically has each letter and a pressed or not pressed state. And then as I'm looping over and I have a note on or note off, I'll update that state and let it know the note's pressed or the note's not pressed. And then I'll also have a time variable like I mentioned, and that will keep track of time. But let's crank it. Let's stop talking. Let's do it, right? So we'll have a time variable. We set it to 0. We don't need semicolons because we're in Python. Python. So hard to beat that in. Okay. We basically want to take the time and we want to add the current note time. And that's just that. We're in Python. Increment the time. Cool. So now that we're incrementing the time, be a good time to mention that I still have the other code here for the other add-on. And as you can see here, I actually have all the logic that I need for animating notes. So you can see here that if you have the pointer to the object that you need, you can basically call the keyframe insert method. And depending on the type of keyframe that you're creating, in this case, I'm doing a location-based one, or like position. You can set that there. And then I also set the frame of the thing. Ideally, you're always using the current frame, but in this particular case, because I was doing like input stuff, I needed to do like something the frame before, so whatever. But you get the idea. You do the current frame. And you're asking, but where's the data? Where's the actual position? It uses the position that you've already baked into the object. So ideally, you can see here, maybe, do I do it? Yeah, we move the object. So here we create a keyframe before we move it so that we have like a baseline keyframe. Then we move it. Then we create another keyframe to make it actually animate. This is important because I'm sure if you know keyframe animation, if I do something and I have a button that's like pressed and then like I unpress it, that works. Like the keyframe would be like down and then up. But then if you think about it, it's not two keyframes, because if I have just a down keyframe and an up keyframe and like the time I held it, it would interpolate between those two keyframes and it would just do something where it would slowly raise over the time. And what we're thinking about doing and what actually happens is you're pressing, it goes down, it stays down through the duration, and then it comes up, and that's what happens. So that actually requires a keyframe where you're up, a keyframe where you're down, keyframe sustaining the down, and then another keyframe up, and then you go from there. So it's 4 keyframes instead of 2. And that allows you to get that kind of like held down kind of like look. So that's kind of something that we'll have to imitate here. But this is basically the kind of copy pasting that we'll do. So incrementing the note time. We're doing this from the message. Let's not call it message. Yeah, I guess let's call it message because that makes sense. And let's create keyframes. So ideally this is for each note. Like I didn't mention it earlier, but we're just going to assume that like we're doing the first track only or something. Like ideally I'm going to limit this soon where instead of looping over every single track, I just grab the first track and I iterate over that. You know what I'm saying? Because, yeah, just to simplify stuff. But yeah, let's create some keyframes. Like I mentioned, we need to find the corresponding object. That's going to be kind of tricky. I do remember this being tricky in the other app as well. Basically, to correspond like a note to a key, I had to do this. You see this? This is the object that I want to move. And I have a method called getNoteObject. And if we go here, it is as nasty as you imagine. I basically just have a giant conditional thingy that just goes through each of the different notes and it assigns it to an object. And I will steal that because that just works. Cool. So we'll throw that up there. And we basically need to pass it the note letter and the props. Cool. I can do that. Let's actually bring this out again. And we actually do need the gamepad props. And then we can do this. Simplify that. And we come down here. And we can call our function just like we did before. And we pass it the gamepad props, and then we pass it the current note letter. And that returns something, so let's actually grab the moving objects. And then with the move objects, so we have the time, we have the object that we need. Now we need to figure out, like, we need to move it before we create the keyframe. I'm assuming it's always going to be necessary if we're doing it, so let's get the object first. Corresponding to the note. We bring this up here, and then we can say move objects, location, z, plus or minus move distance, right? And the move distance will be determined by the note itself. So we mentioned earlier that we can see if it's on, what is it called? A note on or note off? Okay, this is testing my Python. What do you do when you need to check? I've done this like 50 times. In JavaScript, I would do the property name in the thing. But can you do that in Python? Like if I just need to find property name. Dir gives it to me. And then I can use dir to do that, but can't I just like check if object has attribute? Yeah, that's what I want. Cool, has attribute. There's a thing. We got it. So we do an if has attribute. We do message. And we say note on. Oh, what was all that? Was I just like things? Okay, cool. I was like, is it actually helping me? It's not helping me at all. But we want note on. And if it has note on, how do I do an inline again? You just do it. Then, God, Python, dude. Inline conditional. I need like a cheat sheet. Gotta start putting a good one together. If condition, yeah, you literally just do that and you just keep it in the same line. So that, no. It would be the first thing. So we want to say -1 if it does that. And then we do else 1. Technically the opposite. So if the note's pressed, we want it to go up. If the note's that, we want it to go down. And we'll not do plus or minus, we'll just do equals. But ideally we would do plus or minus so that it would be relative to where the object is currently at. So we're going to reset its position. We'll just do it plus or minus, why not? We'll see what happens, we'll break it. So cool, the object has moved, ideally, I'm assuming. That was like the kind of syntax that we had to do, right? If I come over here and I look at the same thing that we were doing, yep, location Z, we change it. I even do that too over here. Wow, yeah, I could have just looked at my own code. Boom. If it's pressed, do that. Bam. And then you make a keyframe. Keyframe insert. Could I just copy my code? That would be sweet. And then current frame, I believe I'm going to have to get from somebody. You don't just get a current frame for free. Where's the current frame from? Context scene current frame. Lovely. So let's come up here and associate that with that. And that should be fine because, yeah, we get access to the context pretty early. Ideally, this time variable, like I mentioned, would probably go here because it'd be per track, but for the time being, like I mentioned. Cool. This should do something. Let's like run this and just see if it breaks stuff like it did last time. Ideally, no. So in this case, you can see that I have the C key assigned to this cube. Let me actually do something real quick. We have the technology. I have done this before. So why not? Maybe not that file. That was like the render version, so it's gonna be all nice and big and blow up Blender. Yep. That's when he knew that he made his mistake. How's Chad doing? All this freezes and upsets me. What's up? We're chilling. Good. Oh, what's up, Jedi? I'm wearing it on stream too, that's right. That is correct. I would turn around right now to show you. But the back of the shirt's pretty sick. I'll post a picture of it later. But it's like the design of the PlayStation. And it's like the internals or something, like a blueprint. It's pretty cool. I like it. Oh, and we got a first time chat. I didn't even see that because the thingy looks like so different from a homie. What's up? Hello. Now, where are we here? Freezing Blender. Let's unfreeze Blender. Let's fix this. We have the power. Okay. Let's open it up again. Here, MIDI input test. Let's not open the one that breaks. Oh, and Swish. All the keys are like lined up from the other one. That's really weird, but that's cool that it does that. If you ever work with like Blender plugins, I don't know what it is like with files, but your file actually saves what's happening with the Blender plugin. So if I change any of these properties and I save, it saves it to the Blender file or something. So it's actually really handy when you're doing like plugin testing to like keep track of stuff. And I'm sure as a user of the actual thing. But now we got the setup. We are set up. Let's go. See progression. We got the midi file loaded. We got all of our objects assigned. None of these have keyframes. Let's actually like save a backup file just in case. We'll call it round 4 and we'll call it midi to keyframe. Obey the acronym. Cool. Saved as a separate file so I don't lose anything. Yeah, we can see none of these have keyframes. You would see them down here. Let's come up here. Let's do system console so we can see what we're working with. Generate keyframes. Cool. We generated some keyframes, I think. I don't know. Oh, duh. That makes sense. So yeah, you can see it works. Like we generated the keyframes, things were pressed or whatever. Interesting. Cool. So if I come back over here, what's going wrong? We don't have a time. We're just doing the current frame. And the current frame, as far as the add-on is concerned, is 1. It's never changing. And the benefit that I had with my other add-on is basically when you were playing with the gamepad or you were playing with the MIDI thingy, I do something where it plays the actual timeline. So the timeline, if you saw it in my video, it was actually playing the timeline as I played, so that changed the current frame, and it was constantly giving me kind of a new kind of time value. But in this case, we need to determine the current frame based off of the time variable that we have here. So we saw earlier that I was getting something like, does it show it here? Yeah, let's see. You can see that my time is basically like 000, and then I get this like 3,840. What is that in frames? You know, like how would we correspond that to frames? Ideally, you could do some clever math. So let's like think about this for a second. So we have a Blender file, right? And the Blender file has frames per second already. You know, so let's say my I think the default is like 24 frames per second. You can see this by coming over here into the render output kind of panel tab thingy, and you can come over here to you can just see it on my stream. That's so funny. I'm like blocking it with my big head. I got to really move that. But yeah, I can change it. Ideally, let me move it up. Yeah, now you can see. I can change it to like other stuff. So 60 frames per second, 30 frames per second. But by default, it's like 24. So we have something that's 24 frames per second, but could be like, say, like, I don't know, 30, 60, even 120, whatever. We're running 4K. So 24 frames per second, my thingy has 250 frames inside of it. So 250 frames divided by 24 equals what? That. So, man, that's so handy. I like that. I've never actually done that. I usually just go to like Google or something. So we have two. It basically means that like for every, I don't know, like there's a frame per one, like 10. There's 10 frames per second or something. That's what that means. Some shit. Like 24 frames per second, 250 frames. 10 seconds. That's the math. Something like that. I tend to do my animations at 180. So that'll divide it by 24. And then that gives me, I think, like 6 seconds. 7.5. Kind of an even-ish number. And that's like nice for social media and stuff. So yeah. We basically want to take that number that we're given, and we want to say like 24 frames per second is that or something, right? And that's like in seconds. And then if I wanted to convert that to milliseconds, right? That would be Something like that or something, say, right? So my range of time would go from like 0 to that in like milliseconds. I'm assuming. I don't know. Something like that. So if that's the case, then we could do something where when my time variable is 3840, like we were seeing, that could basically be determined like if I have a total thing of this many milliseconds, we divide it by that or something to find the placement. Would that work? It'd be something like that. It'd basically be a percentage calculation, where I think it would be that number minus that, and then you would have that and then figure it out or something like that, divided by the number, something percentages. But that's the math behind figuring out the frames. Cool. We're kind of there. Cool. And I think we're at time. Streams go so fast, dude. What? I blinked and it's over. But yeah, I hope you were digging the work today. I'll probably continue this. This is one of those projects, like I did, I think, a MIDI customizer last time. We might continue that. I don't know. I didn't like that one that much. But this one you'll probably see again, because this is something that once I implement this, I'm really interested in like setting up some animations with this, because I'm just interested in exploring more like sound plus MIDI or sound plus 3D. You know, like seeing 3D react to sound. I feel like a lot of my animations are just like animations and they just like go. But having something that's like synced to music, it'll kind of like help me kind of procedurally create some animations. It'll be cool. Where I'll maybe be able to go in and just like throw some stuff down, pick a random MIDI file, see what sticks, you know. So that'll be cool. But appreciate everybody tuning in. Appreciate Jedi. Appreciate my first time chatters. What's up, homie? Make sure to follow. And yeah, make sure to follow the socials. There's a lot of new videos going up. I would just finish editing 2 more videos. That was me modeling, texturing the PSP UMD that you guys have seen on socials. And then I also did the PSP case. What's up? The homie subscribe. Who subscribed? I said subscribe. The homie subscribe. Shout out. I didn't see it. Shout out, homie. I really appreciate that. I really do. But yeah, like I said, videos up on YouTube soon. 3D process. And yeah, I'm trying to hit what do you call it? There's like a Twitch thingy or something where you have to stream like I don't know, like 5 days in a month or something, 10 hours, a minimum of 3 people watching or something. So I really appreciate the 3 people watching. I don't know if it's affiliate. It's like the lowest level. I guess it's affiliate, because I guess partner would be above affiliate, right? But yeah, I'm basically kind of aiming for that. Like, I don't want to make money. I honestly don't care about subscriptions and money in that, but I just want to like have a higher level Twitch channel, just so it's like, I don't know, recognized better in the system or something, or I can put up little like emotes that are like cool or something. Maybe that'll let me do that. I don't know. I'm still learning about Twitch. But yeah, appreciate the subs. Make sure to check me out on YouTube, Instagram, all that stuff. Coming back tomorrow, and we'll be streaming a game. I don't know. I'll figure it out. I mentioned in the last few streams that we have a new 4K capture card, but the 4K capture card doesn't work with my current monitor, so I can't actually use it for the PS5 or the Switch. So I'm limited right now to only PC games. But I have a lot of PC games. I don't want to act like, oh no, there's like no games. There's so many games to play. I could be playing Fortnite. I could be playing Starfield. I could be playing like 50 things on this thing. But yeah, we'll figure that out on tomorrow. Tomorrow. Cool. Or I should start this. But appreciate everybody tuning in. I will see you all tomorrow. See you all next week. Monday, Wednesday. Same time, same bat place. Yeah. Keep it easy. It's been super stressful out there in the world, man. Like, just go, like, order yourself a pizza this weekend, chill out. Maybe, consume some sort of substance. I'm not going to judge whatever substance it is, but, like, just imbibe, vibe, because, man, these are some, like, crazy times. But also stay vigilant because they are crazy times. But yeah, love you all. Stay curious, party people. See you